Knock at the Cabin, out in theaters, latest film from M. Night Shyamalan, based on a novel called The Cabin at the End of the World, although apparently changes the entire last part of the story completely from the book. Starring Dave Bautista, Jonathan Groff, and Rupert Grint. In terms of genre, its marketing has been largely has been leaning a little bit towards horror, but I described it more as a supernatural mystery thriller, as a lot of M. Night Shyamalan's movies are as well. Now, what you can't debate about M. Night Shyamalan as a director is that his movies always seem to have a really interesting premise. One way or the other, the central idea is always in some way engaging or gripping. It sort of hooks you in. The thing is, what happens to that idea later is kind of a coin flip. Half the time, the resulting film is strong enough to carry that premise through to the end, like Sixth Sense or Signs or Split or Unbreakable, and end up being a genuinely good movie. And the other half of the time, it's only good for a while, but it falls off before the end of the story, and the movie ends up just so-so, feeling like unrealized potential, like Glass or The Village or most recently Old. Now, when it comes to Knock at the Cabin, I'm very sorry to say that it falls in the latter category. It has an interesting idea at its core, but around the halfway mark, it starts fizzling out and leads to a very underwhelming finale. As I was watching it unfold, I realized that somehow, miraculously, I've managed to go see it without seeing any trailer for it and knowing nothing about it other than the director, the cast, and the poster, which gave me a very rough idea of what it's going to be about. So I'll try to just give you the bare bones of the setup, because I think a lot of my enjoyment came from just that, from this being an unknown factor, from discovering what the film was going to be without prior knowledge. So it starts very quickly, almost immediately getting to the meat of the story without too much unnecessary introduction. A family, two men and their adopted daughter, are staying at a cabin in the woods for holidays. Suddenly, four strangers appear at the cabin in the middle of the day and demand entry, and they are carrying weirdly looking makeshift weapons with them. But very quickly it becomes apparent that this isn't just a regular home invasion, that this is going to be something way stranger and more twisted. That's as much as I'm saying. As I mentioned, one of the two great things about this movie is the way the story unfolds in the first half. There's a really, really well done building of tension here, and what I loved about it was how the dynamic between the intruders and the hostages is so much different than what you would expect, than what you have seen elsewhere in situations like this. The second great thing, though, is Dave Bautista, who I already sort of knew can be a great actor when needed, because we've all seen him in Guardians of the Galaxy and was it Spectre or Skyfall, one of the Bond movies anyway. But for me, Blade Runner 2049 was really the defining moment, because in that film, in the one scene he had in that film, as well as the short movie that accompanied it, that focused on his character and is available for free on YouTube. It's called 2048 Nowhere to Run, by the way. Check it out. Anyway, I remember about those two things being really impressed by him, because he was able to marry his incredibly imposing physicality with a very soft, gentle nature of the character. And apparently M. Night was also impressed in the same way, because he has Bautista doing a very similar thing here. He's very soft-spoken, gentle, polite. At times it almost feels like he sort of tries to appear smaller than he is. Like there's a sense that the man inside the body is smaller than the body itself. But at the same time, his physicality is very much still there, in the way he sometimes carries himself and walks, and in the way the other characters react to him and watch him. I thought that was a really terrific way to use this actor, and he also gives a very, very convincing performance on top of that, so that helps as well. I really hope we get to see more bigger roles like this one from him. Unfortunately, as good as these two things were, it's not enough, and around the halfway mark the film starts to become less and less interesting. I think it has to do with the plotting, where again I'm trying not to spoil anything, but the film tells you what's going to happen, and then it all sort of happens without any hiccups. So there's very little surprise or tension coming from the story itself or unexpected things in it. I also thought that the way the TV broadcasts are used as a story element are kind of silly and not very believable to me. I was always rolling my eyes at them. Same goes for the CGI scenes of all the bad stuff happening outside the cabin. It just didn't look convincing to me at all. So the moment the film sort of replaces the small scale tension between the characters with this sort of outside grander threat, it falls on its face, and the very ending is just completely anticlimactic and disappointing and straight up boring. I've read what happens in the book instead, and I think that would have been a much more interesting and powerful way to end the film. As it is, the movie ends, and I just sort of went, that's it? That's kind of lame. So yeah, another M. Night Shyamalan for the books, where a cool concept is fascinating for a while and then ends up fizzling out in the execution. The longer the film goes on, the weaker it becomes. I thought the first half was great, the second not so much. Overall, pretty average.